Hello, this is my Fuji X100V. One of the questions I often ask myself is this the only camera I really ever need? It's a mirrorless 26.1 megapixel compact camera with a 23mm fixed focal length lens, which is equivalent of 35mm on a full frame camera. It's superb build quality, it's analog dials, which I love. It's a tough little camera capable of producing absolutely tip-top images. So why would I want anything other than this? Well, the question really entirely revolves around that fixed 23mm lens. Can I, or can anybody, or you, live with just a 23mm lens? I mean, what's the advantage of just having this one camera, for example? Well, to me, when it's hanging around my neck, I hardly know it's there. I can put it in a jacket pocket. I haven't got to make decisions. I take it everywhere I go, nearly. I don't have to make decisions when I'm out, or what I'm going to take, what lens should I take. I've got it, and they do say the best camera is the camera you've got with you. And I can be assured that whatever image I take, provided I get things right, which isn't very difficult with this, I might tell you, I'm going to get images capable of big enlargements if that's what I want. And I am a hobbyist, if you like, enthusiast photographer. I'm somebody that does go out with a camera specifically to take photographs. And if I do think I'm going to get something really good, I want to be sure that I can use that to whatever purpose I want, whether it's projecting it or putting it on a wall on a large canvas print, and this camera's up for it. I don't want to go into all this technical spec because it's been done time and time again, but apart from its lovely little lens, and for another 30, 40 odd pound you've got to need to buy an adapter ring which allows you to put this lens hood on, which doesn't come shipped with the camera, rather disappointingly, and it does allow you to put a clear filter on there, which then makes this camera waterproof and weather resistant. It's got a 4-stop built-in ND filter, which is useful if you want to get those blurry water effects or compensate for over bright sunlight on certain occasions. It's got the tilting screen, which is a touch screen, which I don't particularly take a lot of notice of, but because I like to set the camera up to suit me. It's a camera that you can use manually, auto mode, aperture mode, shutter priority. It's a proper camera. And as I said, the only real limitation is that fixed focal length lens. Now, I took this camera, or not this one actually, but its predecessor, the Fuji 100F, a couple of years ago on an extended tour around the west coast of Scotland, and it was the only camera I had with me on that trip, and I took hundreds of images, mostly landscapes, but also some social, documentary, street photography. It performed faultlessly throughout, and I think there was just one occasion throughout the whole of that period when I would have liked something different, because I saw a couple of oyster catchers, and I don't see too many of them, and I am quite interested in wildlife and birds, and I thought, well, I can get within about 25 feet, 30 feet of them, and I got a respectable couple of photographs, images of those birds, but I would love to have had a telephoto lens with me on that occasion, which takes me though to, what is the purpose of your photography? I mean, if you want to do portraiture, street, documentary, landscape, this camera is brilliant. Where it will fall short is if you really do want to specialise or do a lot of sport or action photography or wildlife photography, because in both cases you're not going to be able to get close enough with a 23mm lens. And to do that, you're going to need to start using, here's a Fuji 200mm lens. I mean, look at the size of that. It's bigger than this camera. And and that's a very modest telephoto. But if you want to do some bird photography, you're going to need a 200mm, 300mm at least, and that's going to be the same case if you're doing sport photography. So that would leave you with the option of buying a interchangeable lens camera. And if you stick with Fuji, for example, the closest to this would be the X Pro 3, which, like this, is a rangefinder style camera with Fuji's famed hybrid viewfinder, which I don't want to go into all the technical spec, but that viewfinder is, I think, quite a feature of this camera and indeed the X Pro 3, because what it gives you is the option of the normal range viewfinder you would get on a mirrorless camera, basically a digital viewfinder that shows you exactly what your image is going to look like, whether you are over or under exposing. That's obviously useful. But if you want a really sharp, crystal clear view, you flick the switch and you've got the optical viewfinder, which gives you a bright line frame around the section of the image that you're actually going to capture, so you can see what is just outside that image, which is quite a nice feature. And the X Pro 3 is the same. Now, the X Pro 3 is an interchangeable lens camera. It's going to cost you a few £100 more than this in the first place without any lens. By the time you put a 23mm Fuji f2 lens on it, you're looking at £2,000 as opposed to this costing £1,300. Now, this isn't cheap. That's why I asked the question, is this the one and only camera you need? Because quite often, and realistically, at £1,300 it ought to be your only camera in many people's cases. So, alright, we decided to go for the X Pro 3 and fork out £2,000 to get what essentially would be the equivalent with the 23mm lens. But obviously, if you are going to buy a camera like that, you're inevitably going to buy one or two other prime lenses, or otherwise, why would you own it? And that puts you in the position, every time you take your camera out, do you take all the lenses, or which lenses have you got? You're making decisions and you're carrying an awful lot more bulk. And changing lenses out in the field is not always, it's a fiddly thing, and I've got muck and dirt and more than once on a sensor, which you'll never get with this because you can't take the lens off. The other alternative, of course, is that you buy an interchangeable lens camera and you put typically a kit zoom lens on, which typically would be something of a focal range of 15 to 55mm or 18 to 55mm, very useful focal ranges. That lens is going to be as big as this camera. It's going to add an enormous amount of bulk to the already heavier X Pro 3, for example, and you still haven't got anything capable of doing wildlife or sport photography, so you've got to take all that into consideration. And when you're doing all that, I'm coming round, I must admit, to thinking that this really could be the only camera you ever need. And there's one other advantage I think about this, well, more than one, but no decision making. Every time the best camera you'll ever have is the one you've got. Put it in your pocket, hang it round your neck, you'll hardly know you've got it, but wherever you go, it's with you. You know it's capable of producing top quality images, and it makes you think, and that's something that's quite interesting. It sets you up with a challenge. You know, use your feet as a zoom lens. All right, you can't always do that if you've got a river just in front of you and you want to move closer, but you know, it's amazing. When I was in Scotland on that trip, I got every image I wanted. I never felt with landscape photography that I was missing out on anything. Yes, if you're in confined streets in a city or somewhere and you want to capture the whole of a building, you might have to do a bit of walking, but nothing is ever perfect. And there is something rather nice, I think, and satisfying, just having one solid quality piece of equipment. So it's worth thinking about, I think. Thank you for watching.